In this episode, we talk about what to do right after you've been fired. Let's get started.
Let's get some money.
From New Money, New Problems, it's the New Money, New Problems podcast, a show for successful professionals searching for the tools they need to navigate financial opportunities and obstacles they've never seen. Negotiating compensation, purchasing your first investment property, helping your family with money, the highs and lows of entrepreneurship. New Money brings new problems that require new solutions. Join us as we work through them together. I'm Brenton Harrison, and this is the New Money, New Problems podcast.
Hello, my name is Brenton Harrison of New Money, New Problems, and your host for the New Money, New Problems podcast. If you're one of the people in our community who probably wakes up right at 5 a.m. Central Standard Time just so you can listen to the latest episode of the podcast, you'll notice that this one is posted a little later in the day. That is because this is a pivot from what I initially intended to post. You are aware, if you listened to last week's episode, that we are holding two upcoming webinars, one of them about the state of student loans next week, the following week about how to buy a home as a high income earner. I still encourage you to RSVP for both of those. And initially, I was planning to post an episode about student loans leading into that first webinar. The reason I decided to pivot is because I looked back over the last 6 weeks through text, emails, calls, and I realized that over the last month and a half, I have averaged at least one friend or client, most times both, that has been laid off, experienced a reduction in force, termed, or whatever the term that your employer is using to obscure the fact that you don't have a job anymore. And what I thought would be more helpful on Friday today would be to do an episode on just what to do right after you have been laid off. This is something that I'm seeing across every industry. I truly believe that we are in the middle of like a silent white collar recession. Just when I look across tech, government jobs, consulting, marketing, in every field that I can think of, I know multiple people who have been terminated in recent weeks and months. So this is something that I think would be helpful to cover. In addition to that, we're going to take it a step further. I know we're on a tear of webinars right now, but these are just things that are happening and need to be talked about in more detail than we can on a podcast episode. We're likely going to do a webinar coming up specifically about severance packages, because this is a common thread across those industries. Many of the people with whom I'm speaking, they're being offered severance. They don't really have much experience in negotiating severance. And there is an art to it, just like there is negotiating a job offer, that we want to make sure that we cover. So we're going to go through some quick hitting tips. This is going to be a little lighter edit as compared to some of our previous episodes. So if I have some stumbles along the way, please bear with me. I just want to make sure that we get this episode out quickly, and I don't want to take out as many ums or flubs as I might in other episodes. And we're actually going to start with severance. My first tip to you would be, if you are offered a severance package, to not sign it immediately. This is something, when you talk about the art or the science of negotiating job offers or severance, you need to understand that that package needs to be read thoroughly. And in reading that package, you will likely find that you have at least 21 days to accept the offer. And in most cases, you have at least 7 days, even after you sign the offer, to rescind your acceptance of that package. And to me, that 21 days is an important time to both get your ducks in a row and also formulate a counter offer. We're not going to go deep into the details of stuff that we will eventually cover on the webinar as it relates to severance, but an easy, overarching tip is you need to counter. It is highly unlikely that you would have a reduction in force where you or multiple people have been laid off, and there was not some type of formula that was used by your employer to figure out how much you've been offered. Some people will say for every quarter that you've been here, we'll offer you, a day of severance, or for whatever the case may be, there's something related to the length of time you worked there, the position that you held in that company, and your income. And it's just a formula that they give to you that is the same for a person who may be at your same level. So you want to make sure that you understand, hey, I may not be someone who is the person who needs that standard formula. If they're saying that we're not offering people in this round any more than 12 weeks of severance and you got offered 8 weeks, you need to start formulating your plan and your communication strategy to let them know why you should be considered at the top of that range. And I would tell you, just like I tell people with job offers, yes, if you're at the 5th round of negotiations, I've seen job offers be rescinded when you just can't come to a middle ground. But I have never seen a job offer rescinded just because someone made one counter. And I have never seen a severance package rescinded because you made a counter on your severance as well. So do not immediately sign your severance package, even if it's just taking an extra 7 days to evaluate your options. I would much rather you do so and have at least one counter as compared to signing immediately. The next tip is to change your contact information. This may seem like a very small tip and it's a very tactical tip, but it's one that's important nonetheless. It is very common when I look at people who have their employee benefits, their 401k, their health insurance. When you look at their contact information, they have their work email listed as their contact email. And even though it may be fairly obvious, if a person's actually taking the time to look at that contact information, that's not how it works when it comes to communications that you receive after a job loss. When it comes to things like health insurance, when it comes to things like 401k statements, they're just going to go off of the email that they see listed. So I would encourage you, before you lose access to anything that involves contact information, be it employee benefits, be it things like your 401k, to go in and change your email to your personal contact information as compared to a work address. And this is step 2 that kind of bleeds into step 3. Step 2 being, make sure that you give both previous coworkers and also for websites that you need access to your proper personal contact information. But transferring to step 3, it would be start to document as much as you can. And I say as much as you can because there's a high likelihood, especially if you work in a field where there's like consulting clients or you work in finances, that your access to most systems is going to be shut off immediately. But there may be some other areas where you are able to say, hey, let me go in here and start to document as much as I can, both for things like my past work, so that it's something that I can refer to if I don't remember the name of that award for which I was nominated, or I don't have the details of some of the deliverables that I was able to compile over the time that I was working here. But even also in terms of possible legal claims, there have been situations where someone has a severance package and they say, this won't do. Matter of fact, there are some things that I want to discuss because I am at the cusp of a legal claim that I may be considering pursuing. And if you don't have documentation of those efforts, you risk losing access to those files if you don't act quickly. So you want to make sure that you document as much as you can. And there are multiple areas that ability to document will help you out. The first is severance. As we talked about, if you're building a case, if they say offer you 8 weeks of severance and you think that you're eligible for 12, that past effort that you've put in place can say, here are the reasons that I think I should be eligible for the top range of whatever severance is being offered for the employees who are a part of this reduction in force. It can help in those endeavors. It's also helpful for future employers because you want to have an idea of the terminology surrounding how you're leaving and why you're leaving. So for example, if these are people that you are going to list as potential references and you're not aware that in terms of how this termination is being described, it's described as if it was a termination for cause or a termination for misconduct. Those are things that you would want to know before you go out into the job search and you list this prominently on your resume as a place that you have worked and are listing these people as references. That's information that you need to know in terms of what are the circumstances regarding this layoff. And then lastly, it's helpful for unemployment. We're going to talk about unemployment shortly, but unemployment is something that you have to be eligible for based on your state requirements. And those requirements will vary based on where you live, but a common thread that you'll find from state to state is in most cases, you cannot receive unemployment if you are terminated for misconduct. There are other requirements like whether you are willing to work, right? You can't be turning down job offers left and right and stay on unemployment in most cases. But to my point of understanding the communication behind your layoff, you want to make sure that that is clear. It can even be a part of your severance package in terms of how that's communicated to future employers and unemployment agencies, because the language regarding that layoff could be something that could potentially make you ineligible for state unemployment benefits. And lastly, before the break, if possible, schedule some last minute health appointments. So for example, hopefully you have a situation where they'll give you at least a few weeks where your health benefits will continue before that severance package kicks in. And if you have the ability to squeeze in a physical, or if you have vision benefits and you can squeeze in that eye exam and that new pair of glasses that you have on your plan every year, that's something that you want to consider doing, because if you are going to switch plans, which is an option that we'll talk about after the break, it may be some benefits that you're leaving on the table And you will often find that your workplace plan is going to be more affordable than what COBRA coverage would be, which is what we'll cover after the break. So if you have the ability to say, hey, I haven't done the annual physical, let me call and see if there's any availability for a walk-in in the next couple of weeks, that may be something that will save you some money based on what you have eligible for you in the next health plan that you pursue.
This is the New Money, New Problems podcast, a show for successful professionals searching for the tools they need to navigate financial opportunities and obstacles they've never seen. We'll be right back.
Are you wondering what new money problems you might be overlooking in your financial life? If so, we've got great news. We've crafted the New Money, New Problems Gap Finder to identify potential weaknesses in your finances in areas ranging from budgeting, investments, insurance, and even the threat your extended family's finances could pose to your household. Please head to newmoneynewproblems.com/gapfinder to complete it today. Again, that's newmoneynewproblems.com/gapfinder to take the assessment.
You're listening to the New Money, New Problems podcast. Subscribe now at newmoneynewproblems.com. Welcome back.
All right, let's dig into that insurance and health insurance world a little deeper, because recommendation number 5 is to evaluate the portability of your benefits and also evaluate your COBRA coverage. Portability means that there are certain group insurance plans at your employer that you can take with you if you follow certain guidelines when you leave that job. You see this most typically with life insurance and disability insurance. And I've covered many times on this podcast, and my preference is for your workplace coverage, especially for life insurance, to not be the bulk of your coverage, or definitely not be coverage on which you depend. I would prefer you have individually owned coverage that's separate from your employer. That said, you may not have followed that advice, and this may be insurance that you are counting on in the event that you die. And what you don't want is to happen is, for heaven forbid, you pass between jobs and now all of a sudden your family is left with nothing. Same is true for disability insurance. If you're unable for some reason to qualify for individually owned disability insurance, group disability insurance may be all that you can be offered. And you want to make sure that if you can take that policy with you, that you consider doing so. In most cases, that portability is something that can act as a bridge. So even if it's something that you take with you until you find another job that offers group life insurance, and you can cut it at that time, but it's not something that you just want to walk away from without evaluating your options. Now, those are smaller types of insurances, not in terms of their importance, but in terms of the immediacy and the urgency with which you pursue them, as compared to like a health insurance. So health insurance is something that is very, very heavy on people's minds, typically when they lose a job, because you don't want to be in a position, especially if you have a partner, or heaven forbid, if you have children, where you have no health coverage. So in that instance, you typically have 2 options. You can have COBRA coverage, or you can have a qualifying life event that allows you to pursue a state plan outside of open enrollment. Let's dig into each of those options. COBRA coverage is basically the continuation of the health plan that you had at your previous employer. It's something where in most cases you have up to 18 months to have that COBRA coverage before you would have to find another plan, and up to 60 days to decide whether or not you're going to accept COBRA in the first place. That can vary depending on the reasons that you're being offered COBRA, but that's something that you'll see that's typical in that space. However, COBRA coverage is often very expensive. And the reason for that is most workplace plans, in terms of health insurance, you pay as an employee a much lower cost than what it actually costs to cover you and your family. The reason for that is because many employers above a certain size, they subsidize the cost of your health insurance. So it may actually cost $1,800 a month, but you're paying $500 a month because they're paying $1,300 of that $1,800 on your behalf. We've seen scenarios where it's that big of a gap between what you pay and what it actually costs. We've seen scenarios where someone on a family plan went from paying $1,500 a month to almost $3,000 a month because of the quality of that plan in terms of what it cost them under COBRA. So it's something that you need to understand. Hey, if I want to keep that plan, I better really, really, really want to keep it, because I'm likely going to pay much more for it. And the alternative is to use your termination as a qualifying life event to apply for a healthcare.gov plan outside of open enrollment. Open enrollment is typically in November or starts in November of each year. And if you're going to try to get a health plan on the exchange, you have to apply during that period of time. However, there are certain life events called qualifying life events, where if one of those things have occurred, you can apply outside of that open enrollment window. An example would be if you've had a child, if you've gotten married, if the person that you had health insurance through lost their coverage. Those are examples of qualifying life events. And a big qualifying life event is you losing your job and experiencing the loss of health coverage. So you can go on healthcare.gov in that instance. You can tell them the life event for which you qualify, and you can evaluate plans that are likely going to be at a significantly lower cost than what you're paying through COBRA. So it's really important that you understand the difference between these two plans so that you can build it into how you're going to move forward financially. Number 6 is after you have accepted your severance in whatever form it finally landed on, you need to consider filing for unemployment. And as I mentioned, the qualifications or the eligibility requirements for unemployment are going to vary from state to state, but some common things in terms of if you're eligible would be I was terminated at no fault of my own, meaning I wasn't terminated for misconduct. I am actively looking for a job, and I am not turning down jobs left and right. So this is something that you can file with your state unemployment office. We'll try to put a link at least to Tennessee for the requirements in terms of what would make you eligible. And this is something that can help you for the next steps in terms of extending your ability to look for a job that suits your resume as long as you need to without worrying more than you already need to about what's going to happen to you financially. Number 7, we just got 2 left. And number 7, these are quick hitting tips in terms of what to do. Number 7 is to determine your burn rate. And burn rate is a business term, but I think it applies to personal finance as well in a scenario where you're in an emergency or you've lost income. What burn rate refers to when it's a company is you're looking at the reserves that you have and you are determining in a severe scenario where we have lost our revenue and I look at our reserves, how long, based on how much we're spending per month, can we go before this business goes kaput, right? If we have $50,000 in reserves and we're spending $5,000 per month, we have a 10-month burn rate. And the same can be applied to your personal finances. When you're looking at things like your employee benefits, your unemployment benefits, your health insurance, be it through COBRA or healthcare.gov, it is likely, if you don't have a passive income source, and you know how I feel about passive income sources, that you are pulling money out of hopefully emergency reserves, but those emergency reserves are not endless. So you need to have an idea, hey, here are my basic expenses. Here's how much I'm planning to spend per month. If that is the case, and this is an extended period of job loss, how long can I go before I'm going to be in trouble? And that would be your personal burn rate. You may be able to make it 3 months. You may be able to make it 6 months before you would have to tap into things that may charge you like a penalty and taxes, like a retirement account, before you start having to live off of credit cards. And that may be a shorter amount, right? You may only be able to go 30 days before that's the scenario. But even if that's the scenario, you need to understand and know what your burn rate may be. We went through this recently where we had a situation where I'm looking at a family and how much they're spending during a period of unstable employment. And I'm saying, hey, like it looks like you have about a 9-month burn rate. You need to keep that in mind, because if we get around that 7th or 8th month and we haven't found anything, now we're starting to talk about, it's not about finding the perfect job. It's about finding a job because we're running out of options here. So understanding your personal burn rate is important. And what it allows you to do is know when you might have to follow step 8, the final step. And that is understanding your options when you need to contact your creditors. So in most situations, when you have things like, say, a private student loan or a mortgage or a credit card company, there is a program that that company may have where you can apply for a hardship. So for example, you might have a mortgage lender where if you ask them about hardship programs, they may say, hey, here's the terminology and the terms for a hardship waiver or a hardship loan. That may be something that looks something like, hey, for example, you can not pay your mortgage for up to 3 months. But what we do is we take those 3 months that you should have paid us and we tack it on to the end of your amortization period for your loan. It's almost like an interest-free loan that they're giving you at the end of the period. Although in some cases it's not interest-free. Your credit card company may have a similar program. Your private student loan may have a similar program. If it's federal student loans, you have forbearance for which you can apply in situations where you've lost income. Or if you're on an income-driven repayment plan, you can call your creditor and you can say, hey, I no longer have income. I need you to recalculate my payment under this income-driven repayment plan. And they can recalculate it to zero in some cases, depending on whether or not you have a spouse in that relationship who's on your tax return as well. But understanding the programs that are available with your creditors will give you some runway so that if you do it now, at the end of your burn rate, which hopefully you never reach that point, you're not going to be scrambling at that time trying to gather all that information at once. You'll know what your options are. As you get closer to the end of your burn rate, you'll know who to contact and how, what to ask for. And hopefully, in this extreme scenario, be in a position where you're not grasping at straws to make sure you're okay. So this is something that hopefully is not relevant to you right now. Hopefully it's not relevant to you in the next few months. But as I said, there are so many people that we're coming across who are experiencing job loss that we wanted to offer some immediate tips. Again, we're going to offer a webinar in the coming weeks specifically about the severance package itself, your rights when you're being offered severance, how to negotiate a better offer, and what to consider in terms of what you should ask for. So please be on the lookout for that information. Also, check the show notes to register for our 2 upcoming webinars on student loans and home buying for high income earners. And I hope to see you next week in the episode, and I hope to see you for that student loan webinar. Talk to you then.
From New Money, New Problems, this was the New Money, New Problems podcast, a show for successful professionals searching for the tools they need to navigate financial opportunities and obstacles they've never seen.